Welcome back to Models of Masters. I'm Michael, and today I am joined by a special guest here in his Las Vegas, Nevada residence, kind enough to invite me into his home. Travis Chappell, serial entrepreneur and creator of Guestio, which we are going to get into in today's conversation. So what's going on, brother?
Yeah, what's up, dude? What's happening? How you enjoying Vegas?
Loving Vegas.
Yeah.
It's always a high energy getaway.
Oh yeah.
So I often like to just come and kind of restore,
Totally.
energetically, and it's a little bit of an adrenaline rush. So I always try to parlay that into creative endeavors.
Yeah. What are you in town for?
Just interviews, honestly.
Oh, okay.
Sweet. Yeah, meeting with you, and then just also possibly going to be investing in my first multifamily property.
Oh, cool.
Within the next 6 months or so. So just kind of getting the lay of the land a little bit.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, welcome.
Thanks, man. So how long have you been in Vegas?
Almost 5 years now.
5 years?
Yeah, I'm from Southern California originally. Just wanted to escape the taxes and the kind of crappy parts about where I grew up. So so everybody thinks Southern California, they think like Hollywood and beaches and all that kind of stuff. But there's also a lot of crappy parts in Southern California, and I'm from one of those parts. So for me, it was like, let's get out of here. It was like, let's either move to one of the really nice parts or let's bounce, you know, from California. So we came out here about 5 years ago now.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so I guess take me back to kind of the origins of Guestio and what kind of inspired you to start down that path. Yeah,
sure, dude. So I've just kind of always been a hustler, in that part of that hustle mentality. Just kind of had to figure it out because I grew up like super religious. And so inside of that world, it was very much encouraged to go into ministry. And so that's kind of the path that I took after high school was ministerial college. And that college I went to was on the same campus as the school that I went to, which was the same campus of the church that I went to. And so like from the time that I was kindergarten all the way through my senior year of college, I went to the same campus every day for church and school. So coming out of that, I basically realized pretty quickly out of college that I didn't want to be in full-time ministry. And I didn't really have anything to fall back on except for I just was a door-to-door salesman during college just to make a little bit extra cash and stuff like that on the side. And so I just did door-to-door full-time after I left college because I was just like, I don't know what else to do. I don't have any, like I said, there's not a ton of employers, lining up to hire you with an unaccredited Bible degree. And so I just did door-to-door sales. That was what I knew how to do, and I was pretty good at it. So I just kept doing that for several years. Nice. And eventually got to the point where I was like, this is cool. And at the time, I think it was like really good for me because it gave me some freedom. I was able to make a 6-figure income at 22 years old, knocking doors, 100% commission in 20 hours a week, So like I would wake up, do whatever I wanted. I would knock doors for 4 or 5 hours a day and, make enough money to do 6 figures.
What were you selling?
At the time I was selling alarms.
Alarms. Okay.
Yeah, door-to-door alarms. And this was up in Fresno. We had moved from Southern California up to Central Cal. Okay. And at first, like I said, it was really good because it was just like I had a goal of making 6 figures, hit 6 figures, but then also it gave me the freedom and like kind of some extra time to be able to do what I wanted to do, which was the first time in my life I was ever able to do that. And after some introspection and things like that, I basically got to the point where I was like, hey, this is cool now as a 22, 23-year-old, but I don't know if I want to do this when I'm a 32, 33-year-old. Right. And so if I don't adjust the path now, that's where I'm going to end up on accident. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I was like, I should probably, I'm a millennial, should probably learn how to make some money online in some way. That's kind of seems like the future of business, Right. And so at the time, like I said, I didn't know what I was doing. So I just kind of was searching for ways to educate myself, got into some YouTube videos, started reading some books, listening to audiobooks. And first time in my life, I came across these things called podcasts. And I just liked the format. I was never a big reader. In fact, it was like a running joke in my family how much I wasn't a reader growing up. And so that format was one that I really enjoyed. It was conversational in style, still somewhat entertaining, but also extremely valuable depending on the show you listen to, and totally free. Yeah. So I just listened to a ton of podcasts, and after a while I was like, this would be pretty cool. So I started my own show, started going well. We started doing coaching and consulting for people on how to grow their own podcast, start their own podcasts, and then for entrepreneurs on how to grow like profit channels off of their podcast. Right. And then that all basically led into Guestio because I was experiencing the problem myself. I had my own show. Okay. And then we had a bunch of clients and we had a bunch of course and community members and students who were basically all saying the same thing. Like, hey, this podcasting is cool, but I don't know how to go get really good guests, and I don't know how to go get myself booked on shows to grow my own audience. So Guestio was essentially a software program that we built to solve that core problem. So that's kind of where it came from.
Yeah, that's amazing. A couple questions kind of off the back of that. So number one, who or how did you develop the actual, I guess, the prototype or the first iteration for the...
Yeah, good question. So I am not a coder. I have never written a line of code in my life. Yeah, I'm not a product guy. I don't come from tech. Like I said, I'm a ministry dropout turned door-to-door sales guy. So like I didn't have any experience. But luckily, I basically had a friend of mine that I was talking to about this software idea, and he had just exited his software company. So he was like kind of acqui-hired by this $500 million software company. They bought one of his projects from him, a little software project that he just was doing on the side, and then hired him to be one of their like chief head product people. And so he kind of fell in love with software that way and started a software development firm on the side of what he got hired to do at that other company. And they were looking for clients. And so they only had one client at the time. They were just getting started. And so he offered to do like all the wireframes for the first version of the software for me for free. And when I saw them visually, it was just like, I gotta keep moving. I gotta keep building this. Like this is like an idea that I had. I feel like it's going to do well. I just got to get this thing out there.
Plus the serendipity of coming together with him at
the
right time.
Sure. Yeah. So, and it was during COVID. So like basically before COVID, I was doing, like I said, a lot of, education stuff. So we were running masterminds and events and stuff like that. And then our masterminds and events business obviously got shut down during 2020. So I had a little bit of free time, some resources to allocate somewhere else. And so software kind of became the thing that we decided to go ahead and tackle. And so the first version of the software I threw down on credit cards, 0% interest credit cards, and built the first version, and then took that first version, went and raised capital, and then, start focusing on it more from there.
And how many years ago was that?
This was last year.
That
I raised the first round.
So very recently.
Yeah.
You are the second entrepreneur that I've talked with in the last 2 weeks on this show who is a non-technical entrepreneur like myself. I had no technical experience.
Yeah.
And who started an app, or a platform or network, whatever you want to call it, and just bootstrapped it, man.
Yeah.
And met the right people at the right time. And it was just kind of the perfect storm for, the initial phases of what has become, a real asset for you.
Yeah, totally, man. That's what I say about podcasting is it's like engineering serendipity. Use the word serendipity earlier. Yeah. And it's it's one of those things that's worth putting effort into. Cause like you think serendipity is something that it's by definition unengineerable, right? That's what makes it serendipitous. But if you find over time that if you continuously put yourself in positions where opportunity abounds, that you tend to have more serendipitous moments happen. Does that make sense? Yeah, exactly. The more opportunity you put yourself in front of, the luckier you are to be able to take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I've found that to be true in areas of life other than business as well, relationships, jobs,
sure,
health, fitness even. So that's huge. Something that I've been thinking a lot about and just observing is that I'm a digital native. You're a digital native. Like you said, we're both millennials. So I think that social networking and online community building and content, it's sort of like it comes pretty natural to us. Mm-hmm. I wish, in retrospect, looking back like a decade ago, I wish I would have gotten started with my entrepreneurship journey online specifically earlier, but that bug didn't hit me until just a couple years ago. So now I'm in a place where I'm trying to play catch up a little bit.
Totally. Yeah.
In my own mind. It's not a race, but
yeah.
Do you ever look back at, where you were a decade ago, and what are some of the things that you kind of pull from those days or some of the lessons you had looking back? Yeah,
of course, dude. I have the same sentiment. I wish I would have found what I was doing now back then. Right. And for a couple of reasons, especially on the podcast side, because if you're a young person, I don't see, and you have any question about whether or not you're doing the right thing in your career, I don't see why you wouldn't just start a podcast. It's not for the downloads. It's not for sponsorship revenue. It's just to talk to interesting people and ask them a bunch of questions about their career, the choices that they made, the regrets that they have, the things they wish they would have known, the things they wish they would have done, the people that you meet, the opportunities that come from it. There's so many advantages of doing it. However, in this particular timing that we're talking about, had I started a show when I was 19 instead of 24, I would have been starting a show in 2012, which would have been like, if you started a podcast in 2012, it was much, much, much easier to grow it into a massive audience because it was just the total number of podcasts was so small back then. So if you just did it well and did it right, then you had an advantage on so many people. So in this particular scenario, my advice would be start a podcast earlier, just because I think that it's really a really good idea to do that when you're younger. But also in this particular case, the timing would have been really, really excellent for me.
I think in the grand scheme of things, like, we're both still early adopters.
Yeah, totally. I think so too. I think so too.
They're still kind of in their infancy.
There's still only 3.5 million, 4 million total podcasts, which is still 1/10 of how many YouTube channels are creating content. Okay. So, and 1/100th of how many blogs are out there. Right. You know what I mean? So like, if you compare it to other content channels, especially you look at books, there's 500,000 books that come out every year. Yep. You know what I mean? There's only 3.5 million podcasts. And of those, less than 500,000 of them are actually active. Like, that includes all dead podcasts, the ones that just like they were made 4 years ago and they did 7 episodes and they never did any more after that. Yes. So that includes all of those. So, there's less than 500,000 that are actually actively releasing content. And of those, maybe 50,000 of them are decent. Right. You know what I mean? And then of those, it's like, so yeah, I agree with you. We're still kind of Wild West days. Yeah. It's only been around for a decade. It's like all social media, man. It's like, we don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, because like, we're still so early on in this completely new media landscape.
And, building your own thought leadership brand or your own content brand, it's really an investment that you might not know now exactly where it's going to go or how it will pay off. Right. But just by virtue of building your own thought leadership brand in the marketplace, you're going to be able to leverage that or parlay that somehow at some time and place. And it's going to benefit you regardless because of everything you're going to learn.
Even if you're not an entrepreneur. We've helped people start shows who are like employees, but it helps them like get promotions at work or add value to their leadership or build better relationships with the executives or like, you know what I'm saying? Like there's so many other reasons. It's not just for entrepreneurship, and it's going to benefit you at some point down the road if this is something that you're constantly working on. And I think I'm a pretty good example of that because just due to the nature that when I started my show, I had no idea how it was going to turn out for me. And I had no idea, like everything in my professional career today stems from my podcast somehow. Right. Everything in my professional career comes from my podcast somehow. Yeah. The coaching that we did, the revenue that we did there, the courses that we did, the audience that we have, the relationships that I have. Like the other day I was having like a pretty rough day in just a regular rough entrepreneurship day where you just get hit with a couple of things that are just like, man, it's like another one bites the dust, like one thing after the other, lots of fires you got to put out. And I took off a little bit early that day just to kind of like clear my head and stuff. And I was just smoking a cigar on my patio, just thinking, to myself. And I texted probably 5 or 6 people, that I look at as mentors of mine. And I got responses from all of them, and I was talking through a couple of things, and I looked at the list and I was like that night, I was just looking at the 6 most recent text conversations that I was having. I was like, I'm blessed. Yeah. Like the people that I was texting are people that are like international speakers and thought leaders and have sold companies for massive amounts of money. And like, these are just people that I can just text. I would not have any of those relationships if it were not for my podcast. 0 of them. You know what I'm saying? So like there are so many just additional benefits from doing this exercise rather than just worrying about getting some sponsors.
What are some of the things that you look for in a mentor or that attracts you to want to connect with somebody and learn from them? Yeah,
to me, it's a matter of, do they have a version of life that I could see myself living or that I aspire to live? And not even like, there's going to be very few, if any, that have every single aspect that you want. Yeah. But what you can do is like take pieces of it from different people, where it's like, I like how that person, runs their business. I like how that person has their relationship with their significant other. I like how that person shows up as a dad. You know what I mean? You can take little bits and pieces. I like how that person writes books or whatever. You take bits and pieces, and then you go find the people who have done the thing that you want to do. So to me, it starts with like clarity around what I want in life, and then looking for people who are doing big things around the thing that I want. And then trying to do something that I can do to connect with those people. And again, this is why I come back to the podcast thing, because I think that it's like, I think most people mess up on this because they'll only come up with a list of like 3 people. And then they reach out to those people. And even if they get in touch with them, maybe they just don't vibe, right? They're just like you think you're going to vibe with somebody, then you like reach out and you build some sort of a connection. And it's like, this person's just not who I thought they were. You know what I mean? Or it's just like, they're who I thought they were, but like, we don't connect. Mm-hmm. So I've also had that experience with a lot of people who I originally thought like, that's somebody I really want to connect with. And then I get to know them a little bit and I'm like, not my cup of tea. You know, like we're just, not to say that they're a bad person. It's just like, you know what I'm saying? Like when you meet people, you just kind of get that energy of like, this is one of my people. Like this is somebody that I definitely can see myself like learning from, hanging out with and things. So that's why that's why I like the podcast part, because like it enabled me to connect with not just like 3 or 4 people that I looked at as people I could learn from, but like hundreds of people, so that I can kind of pick and choose the people who not only are people who I perceive that I can learn from, but are also people who I'm like they're my people. Like we vibe. We're similar wavelengths in life. You know what I mean? And I think that that's important.
Let's talk a little bit about, I want to talk about Guestio, and if you're open to sharing some of the big wins or the numbers around that, I'll leave that kind of to you, but just a bit more on like a macro level in terms of your focus and your attention on like a monthly basis. Mm-hmm. What are some of the biggest priorities that are taking up your time, and where are you really focusing your energy today?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. So we raised a $1.3 million pre-seed round last year. Okay. And then we kind of officially launched at the beginning of this year. And this year we'll do 1.4 million, 1.5 million on in that company. And the very top of mind thing for me that's like how are we going to get this from like 1 million to 10 million is hiring at the executive level. So every hire that we've made up to this point has been, they're all great. I'm lucky I'm blessed to work with a really great team. But it's mostly kind of more junior level employees that are coming in to like, you know, own this certain role or this position. And now it's more like trying to bring in people who are more decision makers that can take a lot of like the actual stress of daily decision making off of my plate, so that I can focus more on like, you know, top tier strategy and biz dev with, you know, potential partners, investors, as well as onboarding new, you know, talent to the platform, and then creating my own content and kind of leading the way. Cause like, you know, we're a content based platform. So it's like, if we're going to preach how awesome content is all the time, then I have to be the one to also kind of be like, I'm not just saying it. I do it as
Living
well.
That life.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So that's really top of mind for me right now, is bringing in like operator and, you know, head of product, like these kind of higher level roles that are going to be able to like really own these decision making positions on a daily basis.
So you mentioned kind of where you're at with your first round of fundraising, and then kind of that next level goal that you're looking to hit with the business from a monetary perspective, but just in terms of the capabilities of the platform to bring together, you know, influencers, celebrities, and potential guests with podcasters. What is your kind of big vision for the platform? Where do you see things going, you know, 5-10 years down the line of this? Yeah,
for us, like we're really trying to focus in on the creator side, on the podcast platform side, because I just think that there's a lot of podcasters, independent kind of creators that are out there that I want to be careful how I word this, but they kind of get taken advantage of by businesses, because they don't know the business side of things. So they don't even know what they've built. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if you don't have a podcast that gets 50,000 downloads an episode, it's like, yeah, but you built one and it gets whatever, 1,500. And then you have this booking agency that's charging this guest, you know, $1,500 to come on your show, and then paying you $0 of it. And then you're the one that built the audience, though. It's just kind of like a weird thing that happens where these creators just like, they're broke and they don't know how to turn on the monetization factory. Yeah. And so we're trying to really kind of work on that problem a little bit more. We paid out a little bit over $400,000 this year to creators. And so we're really trying to focus in on like, how can we allow creators to be able to monetize their audience a little bit more effectively? And that's kind of the big picture for us.
Cool. So we like to keep it real on this show. We like to, be vulnerable and raw. That's a personal value of mine. What is one thing that you are observing right now within culture or within the podcasting industry or just social media that is either challenging for you or that you're seeing other people struggle with that you think needs to be getting more attention?
Yeah, I would say financial discipline, and delaying gratification. I think one of the biggest common denominators for the majority of the successful people I've talked to is that they've all been able to delay gratification in their life. And there's a ton of studies on this as well. And the most famous one would be the marshmallow test. The marshmallow test is a book that came out. They talk about this experiment where they gave these kids a marshmallow and then they left the room and they're like, hey, if you wait to eat the marshmallow until we come back, we'll give you a second marshmallow. And then only a certain percentage of the kids did it, a smaller percentage. It wasn't like 50-50 from what I remember. It was a smaller percentage. And this was done in again, I could be butchering the timelines on this. You can look up marshmallow test anytime and find out the real numbers, but 1960s or something like that. It was a while back to where they were this experiment spanned the entire lifetime of the kids that were in the room. And they followed them throughout the rest of their lives. And they found inevitably that all the kids that were able to delay gratification in that test all ended up doing well in whatever they pursued in life. Mm-hmm. And the other kids struggled. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the biggest things is, especially when it comes to finances. And I think we're seeing that right now. And we're going to see, unfortunately, I think we're going to see the effects of that over the next 3+ years, whatever type of economy we're heading into. It's not, going to be a great one. I don't know the severity of whatever's going to happen, the correction, recession, whatever term you want to assign to it. But I do know that credit card debt is an all-time high, higher than it was in 2008. Yeah. It was like 850 billion in 2008. Now we're close to $1 trillion in credit card debt. Adult savings accounts are, I was reading something, I don't know if it's an all-time low in terms of like the actual number or an all-time low in terms of the percentage of decline, but it's scary numbers on adults with savings accounts and how much money they have in their savings account. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if you do the math, it's like, well, we have record student debt, we have record credit card debt, and we have record low savings. Like, what's the math on that? When you combine it with people that are getting into mortgages at 7% interest and in an inflated market where they're paying 30% more than they should be paying for this property that, was 30% less, 18 months ago. So they're getting into a more expensive property with double the interest rate. Meta just laid off 11,000 employees. Twitter laid off thousands of employees. There's hiring freezes at some of the biggest tech companies, including Amazon. So people are losing their jobs. They have high debt. They have no savings. They have high interest rate on their home, and they came out of pocket a lot to buy the home because it's an inflated market. It's just like everybody gets sucked in to what everybody else is doing. And that's just a human thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's social proof. People tend to follow the crowd. Mm-hmm. But if you listen to people like Warren Buffett, he always says, to get excited when other people are timid and to be timid when everybody else is excited. And so the last couple of years, I've been a little timid. And frankly, I was probably too timid. I probably lost out on a lot of money and a good amount of deals in the last couple of years because I was too timid because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. So I think there's a balance there. But I also think that I would rather be a little more timid when people are really excited. And I think that's going to benefit me in the next couple of years as things start to, as shit starts to hit the fan. You know what I mean?
Where are you investing, or where are you looking to kind of?
Right now, everything goes back to my business because that's within my realm of control, at least perceived control, right? So I can't control the stock market. I can't control what happens to Meta stock. I can't control what happens to Amazon stock. I can't control what happens to the real estate market. I think there's going to be a big correction in real estate that's coming. Like I said, with interest rates and with the housing prices, just that perfect storm of people's debt and income. It's just like, oh man, we'll see what happens on that side. Right. So and frankly, like that's not what I do. I don't do any of those things full time. If I were a full-time real estate investor, then I'd probably, like, I have a lot of friends who are just like, they're continuing to invest in real estate all the time, but they're full-time investors and they're very smart about it. And they know which deals to pick up and which ones are not good, which ones are good, which ones are going to be recession proof, which ones aren't. So I'm not saying like, don't invest in real estate. I'm saying for me personally, where I am right now is I'm putting my money back into my own business, and then I'm holding some cash because I don't want to be left cashless in a time when deals are in abundance. So that's the unfortunate positive of recessions is there's a lot of deals out there because people are desperate. Desperate times call for really good deals.
Yep, got you.
And I think cash is king in those settings.
So you are in a cool position, man, as a content entrepreneur, somebody who has quote unquote figured out, how this game works, and you've built your own content brand, over the course of a decade that has allowed you to meet with so many different types of people. And I know you've had a couple of really big name guests as well on your show. One of the trends, there's several big trends right now, I think, that are kind of emerging, that content creators are being presented with, but also forced to deal with. One of those is this cancel culture that, is really becoming more apparent to a lot of people, myself included, with my quote spiritual page. What are your thoughts on, I guess, like the democratization of the internet, but also just like censorship in general?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of censorship, at all. I understand, because like the thing is, bro, like I try to have a little bit of empathy for the people at the top of some of these companies. Because like if you're the CEO of YouTube and right. you see like actual damaging misinformation or disinformation being spread on your own platform, I get how that would be difficult to sleep at night sometimes. But I also don't think that it's your job to be the person to like drop the hammer and then start. Like the problem is like there's not a clear line of where it stops, right? Because like ultimately what we should be doing as free thinking adults is we should be able to grab information and make a decision for ourselves. And we should be able to like look at information objectively and figure out if this is a conspiracy and it's total BS or if there's some actual truth to this. And unfortunately, people see things on the internet and they immediately go like, well, it's on the internet, it must be true. So like, I understand that like, there's gotta be some, I think, but most of it I am 100% against because like I said, they turn it into these like campaigns to just like squelch an entire like line of thinking. Right. And that is scary to me and the total opposite of what America as a whole stands for. Like one of our core things is like freedom of the press and freedom of speech. And so like when we start infringing on that because of how it makes other people feel, I'm not a fan of that at all. Like it is not my responsibility to control how you feel about something that I say. It's your responsibility to control your own feelings or stop listening to what I say. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not my responsibility to do that. So I'm mostly against it. And that's why I like the podcast space a little bit better than most of the other spaces, because like I own my RSS feed. Apple Podcasts could remove me, but you can still download my podcast on any of the other media players. The only way to completely remove my podcast is my media host would have to literally delete my content from their servers. And even if they did, I could still pop up another server, have my own media host and put on my RSS feed and have it be available on the internet tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? So like YouTube can't really do that, so like you got to be careful where you're building your platforms. That's why I'm really bullish on podcasting. And I'm really focused a lot on my email list a lot lately because I'm trying to focus on the platforms that I own rather than leaving it in the control of some of these other, multi-deca-billion dollar tech companies.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. So as we kind of approach the conclusion of this conversation, what is, I guess, the biggest learning that you've had? Let's go over the last year and then over the last decade.
Sure. So over the last year, the biggest thing that I've learned is my role within my own companies. So for a while I was always like, man, I wonder what it'd be like to be a CEO. Let's like go down this path. Started, founded the company, raised capital, started doing a bunch of work on like reading books on CEOs, listening to CEOs and getting mentorship from CEO friends of mine. And basically after like 8, 9 or 10 months of doing that job, it was like, I don't think this is what I want to do forever. Like, in terms of like the day-to-day operations of building a company, that's not what fires me up. Like, I don't get fired up about like doing meetings and sending Slack messages and checking off tasks in a project manager or moving people into a pipeline. Like, I don't get fired up about that stuff. So I've definitely figured out I'm in my like personality type. I've learned that I'm more of the like entrepreneur with like big ideas and like the chess playing strategy of what to do and where to go. And then when it comes to implementation, and that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, it's just like you just have to hire and surround yourself with enough people. So that's kind of, I feel like what my MO will be here. And then moving forward is like, start something, build it up, get like some proof of concept and idea, traction. We have revenue, we have profit, we have employees, and then bring in people who are like more poised to and love doing, you know, the day-to-day operations of building a company. And there are plenty of those people out there.
Absolutely.
So why try to conform my personality into something that I don't want it to be? So that was a really big learning for me in the last year. The last decade, dude, I don't even know where to start on that. Everything about my life is different than it was 10 years ago. Every aspect of who I am, what I believe, my values, my morals, like everything is different than 10 years ago. So it's difficult to just pick one thing. But I guess if I were to pick one thing, it would just be adaptable. You know, be open, be willing to learn, be willing to change, be willing to. There's so few people I feel like anymore that are willing to change upon the receipt of new information. It's like we're supposed to change as adults, as human beings. Like we're supposed to grow, we're supposed to evolve, we're supposed to learn new things and then alter a point of view. But most people get so buried in their own point of view that even when presented with evidence that goes against that point of view, they still will not change it because they've completely relied and depended on that point of view for their entire life. So like anytime you introduce something new that's an experience that's like completely contradictory to this point of view that they've held for so long, it's easier for them just to dig into their point of view and ignore any evidence to the contrary rather than accepting that as potential new evidence that could shift their perspective into believing something different. And I think that that's dangerous. So that's probably been the biggest lesson I've learned in the last decade.
That's a pretty good articulation of a of a very broad That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well said. I
appreciate it. Yeah.
So where can people go to learn more about what you guys are working on and to connect with you?
Yeah, dude. TravisChappell.com is probably the best place because that's like the hub. You know, you can find Guestio, you can find my agency, you can find my email, my social channels, everything, the podcast, all of that is over at TravisChappell.com. So that's CHAPPELL, TravisChappell.com.
Awesome. Guys, we will include those links in the description and the caption if you're watching this on YouTube. Big thanks to Travis for inviting me into his home again to have this amazing conversation and connect with either of us. We're always up to help and to connect. And thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.